Just as tanks and fighter jets killed and maimed Turkish civilians and tried to overthrow Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's elected government, some voices on the mainstream Western media cheered them on and sought to legitimize these actions in the name of democracy and liberalism. A commentator on America's Fox News said, "In the last few years under the reign, and I mean the reign of Erdogan, it has become a fundamentalist nation run by a crypto-Muslim Brotherhood type of elite. And now the military has said, enough is enough. We're taking our country back." In another instance, a presenter on NBC News remarked, "President Obama may well face a tough choice, side with the military in a coup, or with Erdogan, who's been elected but has been increasingly repressive and autocratic." Once the coup attempt failed, the government went after the network it held responsible for the deaths of more than 250 people and injuries of more than 2,000 others. A PBS News presenter in the US said, "Elements of the military tried and failed to overthrow the government. Since then, the government has mounted a widespread purge in the name of security. Critics of the regime claim this has led to a fierce campaign to silence criticism across all aspects of society." But this Western media framing isn't limited to the July 15 events alone. Many Western journalists and commentators frequently talk about media censorship and restrictions in countries across the global south. They even question and oppose hosting of international events, such as the NATO summit or G20, in those countries. But an analysis of their reporting and social media reveals they're astonishingly silent when it comes to far worse crimes committed by countries they support. A case in point, Israel has killed nearly 200 journalists and more than 70,000 civilians in Gaza. Yet there's been little outrage or calls for boycotts from many of the journalists and outlets that otherwise scrutinize the global south. Their silence over growing attacks on Muslims in the West is also revealing, as is their lack of outrage when Western democracies suppress peaceful protests against the Gaza genocide. Even children and the elderly are in the crosshairs. There's also the issue of free speech.
Why? Say the river sentence, please. Don't say it.
I just say from the river, but not from the river, please.
You said that 2 times. Please stop it. Otherwise, we have to arrest you again.
Okay.
Yeah?
Many political communication experts highlight what they see as blatant Western media hypocrisy.
In 2015, there was a terrorist act. This terrorist act was used by the French government to pass an emergency rule. This emergency rule basically put a standby on the rule of law and put all the executive powers in the hands of the police and the intelligence agencies. And this was completely against human rights and civil liberties. Same thing for the establishment of a new intelligence law that was passed in 2015 as well. Now, these were clear transgressions against the human rights and the civil liberties, but the Western media didn't care about this. You can find some small mentions here and there, but the reality, there was no outcry. Now come to Turkish case, the moment there is some emergency powers given to the state in order to purge a real threat that was existing, that was omnipresent, and that was part that has infiltrated the arcades of the power. Now the Western media is coming to give the lessons, and that human rights should be maintained, and that civil liberties should be at the forefront of the agenda.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has repeatedly lashed out at these Western double standards, famously declaring that a fairer world is possible. But to build that new, just international order, the fight cannot just be fought in the corridors of political and economic power. It requires dismantling the very media hegemony that shapes whose lives matter and whose democracies are considered worth defending. Hasan Abdullah, TRT World, Ankara.